first evening class, and a special welcome to those who are new today. Just for the convenience of those who may not be familiar with the meditation method that we'll use today, I'll backtrack a little bit to say that if it's meditation that has got you particularly interested in joining the activity this evening, then it's probably all the great things that you heard about how meditation can help with your state of mind or your stress levels or your blood pressure or whatever else you happen to be interested in. And the way meditation can achieve all those wonderful things is that it works with a part of ourselves that is often neglected, which you might call your mind. But if I say mind and you think of Western psychology, then immediately you might think of the nervous system or the brain. But in the context of meditation, we think of the mind more in terms of our awareness or our focus of attention. So it's not something physical, but it's something that subjectively has a lot to do with our sense of well-being. And for much of the time, especially if we lead busy lives, then we are surrounded by things that are competing for our attention. Some people have even gone so far as to say that our attention gets held hostage by all the things going on in our lives, which is fine to be attentive to the things around you. I don't think anyone would hold that against you. But at the end of the day, sometimes we feel quite mentally drained by the fact that we've been expending so much effort in projecting our mind to all those things all day long. And the way meditation is intended to help is that it can take our mind back from all those things distracting us in the outside world, back to a place within the space of our body where it has more of a chance to recharge itself, to rest, to come back in balance with our physical location, so the body and mind can be in the same place for once. And there is a place where if we can bring our awareness to that place, then it's particularly efficient for bringing body and mind back into balance. And you might call this place the solar plexus, or you might call it the center of your diaphragm. If you were to take your deepest breath in, then the point where the breath turns around between coming in and going out would be that same place down at the center of the body. And the theory is that if the awareness is centered around that place, then it will come back into balance most easily. Question of how to work with a part of ourselves that we can't see or touch or get an x-ray of gives us a whole different variety of ways to meditate. Because although we can't work with the mind directly, but we can work with it via some sort of mental object. And in some places they use the breath, where you would focus on your breath as it goes in and out, and that would ensure that your mind is at least within the space of the body. But with breathing meditation, you're always working with a moving target, which can sometimes be difficult when we're trying to get the mind to be still and peaceful. And especially since sometimes in our meditation the breath seems to disappear, then we might be left feeling rather in limbo. So what I generally propose for those who are new to meditation is to work with some sort of visual object. And what you would do is conjure up a picture in your mind and then locate that picture down at the center of your body. Some people work well with a picture, others work better with a feeling. And if you find that it's easier for you to feel the picture rather than see it, then that also will work just fine. But the sort of picture I'm talking about might be something like a picture of the sun shining, or a full moon, or maybe a star or a diamond. Something bright and rounded is generally an advantage when it comes to helping our visualization in the beginning stages. Later on it may change on its own, in which case we just follow how it changes. If our mind wanders off from that, then we just bring it back again to the picture. Picture disappears, we can conjure up a new one. Some people take up meditation because they have particular problems with a lot of thoughts in the mind. And generally speaking, if you want the thoughts in your mind to become more peaceful, you can try ignoring them. And generally, if you pay them no attention, then they will die down into silence by themselves. But for some people, the number of thoughts is so many that it's hard to know even where to start ignoring them, in which case you may find that the mantra I've suggested in the slide may be helpful to you. And what you would do with the mantra is hear the sound of that repeated again and again, as if the sound of the mantra has its source at the center of the body. And you would keep on with that for as long as it takes for the mind to calm itself down and have less thoughts. So you'd be doing two things, working with the mantra and also the visual object at the same time. On any particular meditation session, generally we do 2 preliminaries whenever we're about to do our meditation practice. The first is to make sure our body is completely relaxed. Part of that is having a good posture. Everyone's sitting on a chair today, so generally we sit upright on the chair rather than slouching, and it gives us a little bit more ability to find the center of our body easily, and also helps us to breathe easily as well. As for the way we put our hands together, it would be with the right hand on top of the left hand, and the index finger of the right hand goes up against the thumb of the left hand, and our hands just rest palm upwards in our lap. The idea of that is to give ourselves a little bit of advance warning if ever we should get sleepy, because normally the finger will slip. But apart from that, you can just rest your hands as in a way that's comfortable for you. The second stage of relaxation, after having scanned down through our body to relax all the muscles, is to relax our state of mind. And generally that means putting aside any immediate worries on our mind and filling the mind with a positive feeling. And only then do we do the exercise which I mentioned before about visualizing gently at the center of our body and using the mantra if necessary. And generally on a Thursday night we sit for meditation for about 45 minutes. So if you'd like to make yourself comfortable for that, and then I'll move on to the subject matter of the wisdom talk for this evening. So when you're ready, gently close your eyes and settle yourself comfortably for meditation by finding a sustainable position of poise for yourself. You might be sitting on a meditation mat or on a straight back chair. But however you're sitting, your spine should be elongated and yet relaxed. Allow your hands to rest palm upwards on your lap. And remember that this is your time. It's time for yourself, rather than being time for anyone else's benefit. So we might begin by connecting with the sensation of our breath moving through our nostrils. We continue breathing in a slow, steady rhythm. We might imagine that as we breathe, we are taking in delightful fragrance with each in-breath. Perhaps like roses in full bloom, or a freshly brewed pot of coffee, or anything else that's pleasing for your senses. You might notice how your breath expands your lungs, creating a subtle rising and falling movement. And we allow this breath to nourish and soothe us. From there we can imagine a wave of peace and relaxation washing over us as we invite our muscles to begin to relax throughout our body. So we relax and release any pent-up tension in the muscles of our body, starting by relaxing the muscles of our face, whether it be our eyebrows, eyelids, or the muscles of our jaw. If there's any tension around our jaw, we should avoid clenching our teeth together. And as for any other tensions, we allow them to relax completely, and we can just let go. We continue relaxing down through our neck, our throat, down to our shoulders. We let our arms hang effortlessly and allow our hands to feel soft and receptive. Continuing on down, relax all the muscles of our torso, our internal organs, our belly, before allowing the muscles of our hips and our legs to relax as well. Allowing the sense of relaxation to flow in and then flow further down into our body, whether it be our lower, mid, or upper back. Flowing on down through our abdomen, into our legs, relaxing our knees, calves, around our ankles, down to our feet and our toes, allowing them all to relax completely until our entire body feels relaxed. Almost to the point that we feel that our body is melting away into the atmosphere around us. In the same way that sand might run through an hourglass, or that an ice cube might melt away into nothing but water. Sometimes having a picture in mind will help us with the relaxation process. And having relaxed our body, we can turn our attention inward, also to make sure that our state of mind is as relaxed as possible. Often it's just a case of letting go of any thoughts or distractions still lingering in the mind, regrets from our past, plans for the future, remaining in the present moment. If we still have any mental chatter, we do our best to allow it to fade into the background, while giving ourselves the time to slow down and reconnect with the deeper level of our body and mind. While conjuring up inside ourselves a sense of happiness and joy. And if such a feeling doesn't come naturally to us, then we might cast our mind back to a time in our lives when we did feel truly happy. Reconnecting with that feeling can conjure up that feeling all over again in the here and now, as if it were tiny particles of happiness and joy within ourselves, completely filling our body and mind. So once we feel relaxed both in body and mind, now we can turn our attention inward in the normal way, as if inside our body is just an empty space, without any organs or tissues, muscles or bones, almost like a hollow space inside us. And inside our mind, we might conjure up a feeling of positive energy in our life, or perhaps a feeling of empty space within us, filled with happiness and joy. And within that empty space of our body, we might remember back to that object that we imagined a few moments ago, perhaps something like the shining sun, a star, maybe a diamond or a full moon, or perhaps the feeling as if such an object is present inside us, and floating slowly downwards until it comes to rest somewhere round about the very center of our body. Somewhere on the level of our solar plexus, somewhere around the center of our diaphragm. But in practice it can be anywhere within the space of our body which feels comfortable for us. What's important is that if anything distracts our awareness away, we bring our attention back to this central point each time. And if that inner object disappears, we can simply conjure up a new one. We continue by checking in at the center of our body. The way we apply our mind should be with the utmost gentleness, making sure we don't press tightly within our awareness. All we need is the mental equivalent of something like a soft nudge at the center. Checking in gently but firmly. Touching with only a feather-light touch. As little by little we become more and more familiar with what the word gentle can mean for the mind. Often it means being unhurried, taking as much time as is necessary, and simply allowing our mind to slow down and become still, gradually accumulating a sense of peace energy within itself that can pave the way towards the real stillness of the mind. If you find yourself distracted from time to time by thoughts, you can merely acknowledge the activity of your mind and direct your attention back again to your center. But the reality of meditation, at least in the beginning, is that it's always going to be this gentle back and forth. So pay attention to this process by which the mind gets distracted away from the center, then are gently bringing it back again, until at a certain point, bringing the mind back to the center becomes like second nature. The mind wandering will lead us unfazed, and we remain persistent in bringing the mind back again and again. Treating it with the same patience and gentleness that we might use to train a young puppy to come to heel. In meditation, you never have to push anything away. You never have to try to control or fix your thoughts. But if at any time during your meditation you realize the mind has wandered off or got caught up in thinking, don't regard it as a problem, because that's just what it's used to doing. But instead we give it something different. We reintroduce it to the center while continuing to observe at the center. Because each time our awareness connects extendedly at the center, it will allow us to dive deeper to where the true stillness and calm really is, to where the true beauty of the mind is. So remind yourself that there's nothing that you have to get right or perfect. You simply remain curious and observe in the present moment. It's about becoming familiar with the center, observing its qualities. And along the way, it's as if we are creating a space between ourselves and our thoughts, while tapping into that still and silent place between the thoughts. If the thoughts do return, we do our best to ignore them. But if ignoring the thoughts proves ineffective, we can always make use of that traditional mantra, hearing the sound of the words Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, coming up as if from the very center of the body. The more time we give to the mantra, the more power it will have to overcome any thoughts in the mind. And they'll start to lead us deeper toward a sense of purity in the mind as we feel those words resonating within every cell, every fiber of our being. And in effect, in any meditation, we are constantly guiding our mind back to the present moment and back towards our true nature, inward, beyond thought, as we gradually build up a relationship with the center of our body, as we get to know the center. And in return, the center will guide us to the present moment, to the calm and the peace within, allowing us to become more and more aware of the space and silence inside our mind, to the point that it becomes something tangible to us. But in the meantime, we may be aware of thoughts or sounds or emotions, and all we need to do is observe them while maintaining contact with the center of the body, gradually building up familiarity with the center. In the meantime, we need to maintain our sense of patience, rather than asking ourselves why it's taking so long, or why the feeling isn't clear yet, or why the meditation proper hasn't kicked in yet. Being patient in meditation can sometimes mean just sitting back and evaluating our meditation less frequently and less critically. Simply enjoying the journey and appreciating the time that we've set aside for ourselves. Because change in meditation can be slow in nature, rather like grass growing. We can assume that as with any mindfulness practice, whether we see it or not, some sort of improvement is taking place over time, albeit slowly. So we spend our time running less of a mental commentary while freeing up the mind to enjoy our meditation in the present moment more and more. And for now, we sit for a few more moments in silence, lightly and gently, with our inner object at the center of ourselves, and the mantra too, if it's necessary, to reduce the thoughts. Each to our own practice for a few more moments now in silence, until we come to the appropriate time. mind wanders off onto other things. Each time we realize, we simply bring our attention back again to the center of the body as before. The inner object disappears, we can conjure up a new one. But if it changes, then we just follow it in its new form. And this constant optimization of the mind requires a special sort of patience, a special sort of continuity, a continuity which is somehow inexorable and elemental, rather like the ocean itself that can spend aeons breaking large rocks down into sand, simply by touching the land with surf, wave upon wave. In the same way, in our meditation, with the same unfailing gentleness and kindness, we usher our attention back to the center each time. There's no shame in having the mind wander. It's a natural feature of the mind which can happen to anyone. But if our mind should wander, we simply check in again with the center, or breathe the awareness back again to the center of the body. It's no big deal, it's no real trouble. There's no need to feel frustrated or disappointed with the mind. And if we're distracted by thoughts, we just acknowledge them without fighting back. And eventually, if we wait long enough, then they will go away by themselves if we no longer take notice of them. Until eventually the mind becomes emptier little by little. But even in the meantime, the waiting already feels little by little more peaceful. As we continue to remain inside our center in this way for a few moments more. We let the peaceful feeling and energy cleanse this empty mind of ours. And even if the mind wavers, we just accept it. The more neutral we can be, the more robust the quality of the inner energy will become. Which is why the waiting mind is so precious. Because without the waiting mind, nobody can be successful in meditation. It's sometimes said that either all things or good things come to those who wait. Since patience allows us to remain steadfast in the face of provocation or annoyance, misfortune or pain. And in our meditation, it can help us to overcome the restlessness or annoyance when confronted by delays. But this typically only happens when the mind projects itself into the future or tries to elaborate the practice into something more than simple observation at the center. According to the ancient wisdom of the Bhattekarata Sutta, we shouldn't chase after the past or place expectations on the future. But we should remain with whatever quality is in the present, what we see right here, right now. So we continue to remain inside the center in this way for a few more moments, longer in silence until we come to time for some loving kindness meditation today. We continue to maintain our mind at the center of whatever inner experience we've built up for ourselves as a result of the meditation so far today. Whether it's a sense of illumination on the inside, a sense of well-being, perhaps inner imagery. All of these things we can put down to a sense of peace energy within ourselves. And if we're able to touch gently at the center of that energy, then it will melt away at the point of contact, spreading outwards from that point at our center. So for this last part of our meditation, we can remain deep in the embrace of such strong, deep peace energy at the center of ourselves. And we allow that peace energy to expand outwards from the center until it extends to the whole of our body. Perhaps growing beyond that, larger, wider, even beyond the boundaries of our own body. And this can happen automatically in some meditations, perhaps on certain days when our meditation is going well. But whatever our experience today, we just feel aware of that peace energy and its potential to radiate further outwards, making the body structure light and weightless, as thin as threads of gossamer or chiffon gauze, so light that it seems to become transparent. And that peace energy spreads outwards beyond our being, as if there's a soft merging of inside and out. And we remain aware of such a gentle process of the merging. while checking in at the center, which remains full of that same peace energy. And we remain at the center in the deep peace at the middle of a body, basking in the flow of that radiant consciousness, almost as if it were bathed in golden light. And we allow that feeling of peace and wonder to spread outwards around us into the world with good wishes for all living beings. For a few more moments in silence now until we come to the appropriate time.สัพเพพุทธาปะละปะทาปัจเจกานันจะยัมบาลังอรหันตานันจะเตเจนะอระคัมบันดามิสัพพโสสัพพพุทธานุปาเวนะสัพพธัมมานุปาเวนะสัพพสังฆานุปาเวนะสัทธาโสธีภะวันตุเท So if you'd like to come to the end of your meditation for this evening, you can gradually open your eyes again. If you feel at all uncomfortable, then slowly try changing to a more comfortable position before gradually finishing your practice. So far, so good for everyone. New folks, okay? Yeah? Something to focus on the inside? Something to work with. Very good. So this week, we've been seeing a lot of each other. Usually you only see me once a week, but next week we are inundated with school visits and Cub and Scout visits, so this is how it's worked out. But in a way it's good because it gives me a little bit of continuity in this series which I'm doing at the moment on enlightened living, which is gradually working its way through a subsection on topics concerning family harmony. And the big picture is that all of these are values or virtues or practices contained within the Buddhist scriptures, especially a particular teaching called the Mangala Sutta, which are arranged as a sort of 38 steps towards enlightenment, starting with the most basic and working to more esoteric ones. And at this point we are up to about number 14 in the series, and the last few that we've been looking at have been to do with family values of various sorts. So looking after one's parents, looking after one's children, looking after one's spouse, and seemingly unconnected but maybe not so far off is this idea of the work ethic within Buddhism. You might say it's a work ethic because in several other religions they also have this idea of not tolerating laziness. And in this respect, you could say that in Buddhism too there is this sense that if we wish to support family harmony, then if we have already ticked all the boxes in cherishing our parents, children and spouse, if we neglect to be lively in earning our living, then money troubles will eventually lead to family infighting. So from a financial point of view, it's necessary to devote oneself, at least to a certain extent, to earning one's living in order to support our children, to have a legacy to pass on to them, to support one's spouse and one's parents. So in Buddhism, to work hard is almost seen as a way of expressing gratitude or giving something back for all the time, energy, education, love and patience invested in us by all our kind parents and teachers and even the state. So if we receive all those things but we don't put our skills to some good use, then all that investment would be seen to have gone to waste. So sometimes in traditional Buddhism, a lazy person would also be seen as an ungrateful person. So if you're someone who already has all the knowledge, vocational knowledge from blessing number 7 on having heard many teachings, if you also have all the craftsmanship skills from blessing number 8, then it still doesn't guarantee that you will do something with that knowledge. So you might have all the theory, you might have all the skills, but if you don't do anything with it, even people with the best of education sometimes make no impact on their work if they never get around to doing it. So an alternative title for this blessing is sometimes non-prevarication, just to give you an idea of where I'm going with it today. So sometimes the best of people prevaricate, and it's not always because they are a lazy person. And there have been some studies of this, probably for obvious reasons, or these bosses who have to overcome such problems in their workplace. And the sort of reasons that people don't get around to doing things, even when they know it is such a great idea to get on with doing all the things they're so good at, is that they may feel fear of being judged for their lack of ability. So maybe they lack confidence about their ability and they would rather be seen to fail in the task because they haven't had enough time to do it, and then rush at the last moment and make a mess of it anyway, and be able to blame that for the fact that it hasn't turned out right, than to not have some other excuse for shoddy workmanship. Some people it's the opposite, it's out of perfectionism. Or it might be the opposite again, that some people are afraid of appearing to try too hard. They don't want to appear to be a goody-goody, so they sort of beat around the bush. Or if they do that and then it still comes out okay, then it looks like it's a fluke and they still get the cred ratings for it. Or some people have the idea that work expands to fill the time available, so may as well fit in a few other things first before you get round to the real task, because if you only use the remaining time available, then it takes less time, right? But generally the actual work doesn't come out quite as well done as you intended. Some people procrastinate to send a message to their boss out of resentment for the fact they're being controlled, as a way to give back power to the underdog, to say, get off my back to their boss when they feel they're being taken for granted. So they do a sort of go slow, so the boss gets all sort of hot under the collar and then appreciates them more afterwards. That's the idea anyway. And some people procrastinate to control distance in relationships. But whatever the reason, the Buddha taught that procrastination, whether it's in your workplace or even in spiritual tasks like working on yourself to become enlightened or whatever, it limits your ability to earn your living and will be something that endangers harmony in your family life. So what are the reasons that people procrastinate, given that they know it's such a terrible thing? And there's a fun way to explain this, which is sort of like pop psychology, where there's a guy who is a specialist in this, and his name is Tim Urban, and he has a blog called Wait But Why, and he even did a TED Talk on it. And he proposed the difference between what goes on inside the heads of those who are more or less prone to procrastinate. And for a non-procrastinator, then you have someone called a rational decision maker as your sort of numbskull at the wheel inside your brain. And they remain firmly at the wheel and everything comes out on time and you always do the best thing that is needed in your life. However, the cast in the brain of a procrastinator is slightly more elaborate. And they have a couple of extra sidekicks on board, one of whom is called the instant gratification monkey. And on the other side, in the red, is someone called the panic monster. And for as long as there's no pressure, then generally the instant gratification monkey gets to be the one at the wheel. So they live in the present moment and they care only about what is easy and fun. And in other words, they have very little to do with making sense in life. So any thoughts about guilt or dread or anxiety or deadlines or unfinished work, they're all completely forgotten for as long as the monkey is in control. Unfortunately, the only person who the monkey will listen to is not the rational decision maker, but the panic monster. And for as long as the panic monster doesn't appear, then the monkey has great fun doing all the things which are a complete waste of time, but great fun at the time. Until eventually the deadline looms, and who comes out? The nasty, scary panic monster. And this happens whenever a deadline gets too close, or there's danger of public embarrassment, or a career disaster, or some other scary consequence. And when the panic monster wakes up, then everyone gets scared. And generally it's that point that the monkey heads for the hills or for the trees and relinquishes the wheel back to the rational decision maker. So that's when something eventually gets done. Pretty simple, right? But unfortunately, many of the important things in our lives don't have deadlines attached to them. Whether it's seeing your family, or exercising, taking care of your health, working on a relationship, or getting in or out of a relationship, or even meditating, there are no imposed deadlines. So the panic monster doesn't really get a look in to shake us out of our complacency. And it's in this sort of long-term kind of procrastination that it's much less visible or dramatic than the short-term based deadline, which I've been talking about with all these characters in our brain. And it can lead, therefore, to a lot of long-term unhappiness and regrets about how our life has gone. And we might feel frustrated at the end of all that we haven't managed to live our dreams, because we haven't ever got round to chasing them in the first place. And this is somehow the sneakiest trick in the repertoire of the instant gratification monkey. That we are left complacent when there's no deadlines there at all. So, work has two sorts, at least when you're talking about it in a temple context. And when we talk about leaving work undone, then we can talk about physical work that puts food on the table. And indeed, we cannot survive without it, or its means to feed ourselves and our families. But as you may well know, families or ourselves cannot survive by bread alone. And therefore, there's a second sort of nourishment, which is also important, which you could count as work, which is nourishment for the mind. And when we're talking about not leaving one's work undone or not prevaricating, then it means not kicking the can down the road in terms of spiritual work on ourselves as well. So we've had the monkeys in the mind, we've had the panic monster, but even knowing what can go on in our brain or in our head or our blind spots, we still sometimes make a hash of getting work finished. And some people in any office get a reputation for having a big backlog of work. And if you're ever looking for some work that's not finished yet, then you can be pretty sure it's on their desk somewhere. It's the sort of person who has all the work stacked in the in tray and nothing in the out tray. And you might say, oh, well, it's just because that person is lazy or whatever. But often, as we said earlier, it's not laziness pure and simple. Sometimes it's down to technique in the working situation, which means that they are frustrated to the point that they never get something done. And it might be because of wrong timing or wrong technique, or never getting started, or superstitious thinking, or even not making a genuine effort. First reason, wrong timing might mean doing work at the wrong time, or it might mean with the wrong timing. For example, if you plow a field out of season, then the weeds will grow back before you have sown your crop. Yeah? Wrong timing. Or it might mean whether you do something quickly or slowly. If you rush into things that don't require it, then you might ruin the job. For example, if you rush into throwing a pot on a potter's wheel, then you probably will not get a pot, but you get some sort of abstract art instead. But if you're slow in some things, when speed is required, then that can also be a disaster. For example, you're best to study when you're young. If you study when you're old, then you don't have the grey matter left to remember everything anymore, for example. Some people suffer from wrong technique. For example, trying to do something individually where you need to ask for help. So people who are embarrassed to ask for help, try to lift a heavy object and do their back in. They're not good, and work doesn't get finished. Third reason is never getting started, and apart from all the managerial reasons I mentioned for prevarication, one extra reason is that some people are superstitious, and this thing about waiting for the portentous time to start doing something. Any horoscope fans here? Look up a horoscope first before you decide whether to start on a new venture. Not so much. Not even lottery numbers. Try to work out what the lucky lottery number is going to be by consulting the horoscopes. No? No, you're all very rational, I can tell. But gamblers especially are rather prone to this sort of magical thinking. Meditators like us, though, are those who take destiny in our own hands, and of course we're not interested in such things at all. Because often the simple fact of getting down to doing something, as soon as you know you're ready to do it, usually will guarantee success in that task. You don't need to wait for some sort of luck to sort of guarantee that something you get down to doing is going to work out. So you don't need to waste money on fortune tellers. Just if you're ready and you feel ready, then go for it. Yes. And some people may not be genuine in their efforts. They may be distracted, usually in the playground of the instant gratification monkey, but sometimes such people are accused of not being genuine in their efforts. And there are a series of distractions which can put people off getting down to their real task at hand. Sometimes it's obsession with things like food, eating. If you are a complete foodie, any possible antidotes for that you can think of? Well, they say you can go on a meditation retreat with 2 meals a day so that you get used to not having food sometimes. Or you can always try being a monk, where they mix up all the food together in their bowl, whether it's savory or sweet, and just think of food for its calorific value instead. Obsession with sleeping. Possibly you can try a less luxurious bed. Obsession with intoxicants, whether it's alcohol, tobacco, or recreational drugs. For these, it's usually not a question of moderation anymore, but complete abstention, which will help you out, rather than just moderating the intake. Romance. You may need to spend less time obsessing over your dating life, your swiping left or right these days. Obsession with entertainment. You might think there's not much harm in entertainment, but some people can become junkies for things like soaps or sport, in a way that can be no less serious than for intoxicants. Gambling. Often for this you would need to confess your addiction to some sort of sponsor and maybe voluntarily restrict your access to credit cards. Obsession with bad friends. You need to avoid getting in with people who idolize, sort of taking shortcuts in earning a living, and maybe pick slightly more diligent role models. And especially laziness. If you want to get down to it, what does laziness actually mean? Often it means having too many excuses for everything about why you can't do whatever work is at hand. So the moment you stop having an excuse for everything, usually the laziness will disappear. For people who are lazy, it's either too hot or too cold to do anything, it's too early or too late to do anything, or your health isn't quite up to it yet because you're just getting over some illness that you had, or you look like you're about to be ill. So in the end, there's no time that's good for you to do the work. So if you feel that you are a lazy person, then you have to keep track of your excuse-making abilities. Yes. And lastly, some people are not lazy, but they just have incompatible working hours. They work at a time when everyone else is resting. So anything that requires teamwork or cooperation, they fail at that. So sometimes it's not just wrong timing or too quick, too fast, but it's the fact they do it at a different time from everyone else and therefore fail to get any teamwork. So these are all the symptoms of a person who never gets round to doing the work. The science of prevarication, in other words. And just to finish off with for today, before I propose some solutions to all of this, which I'll do in the next installment of this, which you might have to wait a week or so for. So instead of ticking the now box, you have to hold your breath for 7 days or so until you get the answer to what to do about all this. And in the meantime, I will leave you with a story about a person who had quite a lot of entrepreneurial acumen, let's say. And it's a story that comes from 2,000 years ago, in the time of the Buddha, when there was once a millionaire, and he had a servant who was traveling with him in an oxen cart, I guess it was, in the middle of India. And the servant was a very poor man, and he happens to be the protagonist of the story. And as they're going along in their cart, the millionaire pointed out a dead mouse at the side of the road. And he said to his servant, if someone had the proper principles of working as a salesman, even with such a dead mouse, they could set themselves up in life. So hearing that, the servant immediately jumped down from the cart and allowed the millionaire to go home on his own. He picked up the mouse and he took the millionaire's advice to heart. And because he knew a lot of people in the area, some of whom had cats, and he knew that compassionate people who have a cat, hungry cat, won't want to kill mice on their own. So, and cats have to have something to eat every day. So off he went to these houses, and he managed to sell the dead mouse to one of these cat owners for a few cents. And with those cents, he bought some sugarcane juice from the people who were crushing the sugarcane. So, go to the supplier. And he asked for another bucket of plain water and then set himself up at the gate of the town with his sugarcane juice and his bucket of water, waiting for all the flower gatherers to come back from gathering flowers all day long. And of course, their work was very thirsty work out under the sun all day long. And they reached the city gates tired and thirsty, and lo and behold, there was this guy selling plain water, first of all, first cup, and then the second cup would be that of sugarcane juice. And after they slaked their thirst on the water, then he gave them a second cup of sugarcane juice. And they didn't know how to pay him, so they left him each with a little sample of the flowers that they had collected, jasmine flowers. And he took those and he sold them again for a small profit. And the next day he had a little bit more sugarcane juice and water than before. And again he sold it to more flower gatherers until he was able to extend his clientele not just to the flower gatherers but also to the people collecting firewood as well. And in addition to the flowers, he now also had a pile of firewood to sell off at the end of the day. And he kept his eyes and his ears open, and before long he noticed that in the night there had been a storm, and there were a lot of broken branches and twigs and so on that had been blown down in the night. So today, instead, he took his sugarcane juice and his water along to the forest, and he offered his services to the forest keeper to clean up the broken branches for free, because the forester agreed to this very readily because he knew he could now have an easy day. And then the servant guy, he offered free sugarcane juice to any of the children playing in the area who would help him gather up the branches and twigs. And eventually they all helped him, and they're very happy to do that instead of playing at something else. And he had ended up with a huge pile of firewood. He sold the firewood to a potter, and out of the proceeds from that, he was able to buy a big barrel. And this time, where he had sold sugarcane juice by the bucket before, he was now able to sell it by the barrel. And he bartered sugarcane juice for flowers, for firewood, and even for fodder. And that day, a big caravan of traders passed through with many hungry horses. And he told the stable boys in the palace not to sell their fodder to anyone, and he sold his own fodder at quite a good price. And it turned out it wasn't enough for all the horses, so this time the palace were also able to sell fodder for the same high price, and everyone got a profit out of it. And he carried on working in this way until eventually he was able to put down a deposit on a trading ship. So bucket, barrel, ship, and his ship kept on trading until he had amassed a small fortune for himself of 100,000 kahapanas, which happened to be the currency at the time. And in the end, he returned to his old friend and boss, the millionaire, and presented him with the 100,000 which he had earned, saying, "Thank you out of gratitude, because all of his wealth had come from the fact that that millionaire had given him that throwaway comment a long time ago when they were sitting in the ox cart that even a dead mouse can be the source of a person's fortune." And the millionaire was so impressed by the man that he actually returned to him the fortune tenfold, and also gave him his daughter's hand in marriage. So at this point, in case you have to wait 7 days to find out what to do about prevarication, we have a summary from the Buddha that diligence is the path to the deathless, whereas procrastination is the path of death, mostly in spiritual matters, I should add. The diligent never die, but those who procrastinate are as good as already dead. So understanding this distinctly, those who are skilled in diligence rejoice in diligence, and will be able to delight in the pasture of the noble ones. In this respect, as with work in the workplace, so it is with meditation. And for those of you who have already enjoyed meditation today, found that it's some use to you, I would advocate trying a little meditation every day if you can. Maybe starting out with 20 minutes a day at a time of the day which is convenient for you. If you're a morning person, that might be first thing in the morning. If you are a person with problems getting to sleep at night, then it might be last thing before going to bed. Or if you have a stressful job, then it might mean meditating in your lunch break. But if you can fit in 20 minutes a day, then you will see improvement day by day. Maybe good days, maybe bad days, but on aggregate, you will see an improvement in your meditation, being able to go further and faster in your meditation practice. Some people find it difficult to remember what to do in their meditation, in which case we have an app for that, and you can download a map called MindGem, which has more than 100 audio tracks on it of different meditation instructions, which you can follow along with as you are meditating. And you can even set a timer for yourself to be able to come out of your meditation at the time you've set for yourself. Apart from that, in this particular meditation center, we have classes every Tuesday and Thursday in person now. The only difference being that on Tuesday nights it's a little bit of a shorter meditation, 30 minutes, and 45 minutes on a Thursday night. Apart from that, we have, as a remnant from the pandemic times, still a meditation Europe-wide on a Saturday evening between 7 and 8, where there's a talk and a meditation which you can follow along with if you type in those Zoom particulars. And once a month we usually also have a online and sometimes in person too, full moon meditation, which is a little bit more elaborate, a little bit longer, and usually involves lighting something ceremonial along the way. But this month, as it is the month of May, it happens to be a special day in the Buddhist calendar as well, which is the Buddha's birthday. So Vesak Day, as it's called, is something that we're celebrating in person here as well. You can see some of the preparations going on outside with the candle lanterns, and we're taking the Buddha here outside to hold an outdoor ceremony. So keep your fingers crossed for us that we have nice weather, more on the heat wave side than on the rainy downpour side for the Sunday evening between 6 and 8. If you'd like to dress in white for that, that would be appropriate as well if you'd like to attend in person. If you want to watch online, that's also possible with the usual Zoom channel coordinates. For those who like to study what it's like to be a monk, in the month of June this year we are once again able to provide a temporary ordination scheme for 2 weeks for ordination starting on the 4th of June. And if you wish to stay on for longer, you can finish out the whole month as in monastic robes for gentlemen, that is. And the next weekend retreat that we have organized here is for the 8th to the 10th of July. If you look at the website themeditationstudy.com, then you'll see all the details there. There is a cost involved, but it is inclusive for accommodation, food, and meditation during that time as well. And it's not organized here this time, but in a nice place down in Somerset. So get the beautiful nature of the West Country as part of the meditation practice as well. So for today, I think that's all I have for you. But if you have anything for me in terms of questions, comments, or feedback, I'd be very happy to hear from you at this time. So may all of you be blessed with happiness, success, and prosperity in life, and whatever tendencies to prevarication you have in your life, may you be able to overcome all those with ease to be established in diligence both in worldly and spiritual ways from here on in.